Well, Renaldo, thank you so much for joining us here today, and excited to hear about your story. Especially, you're a Super Bowl guy with the Super Bowl just around the corner here. But before we talk football, for you, it was really all track and field growing up. Why was track the sport that attracted you as you're growing up in New Jersey and became a sport that really excelled your career athletically?
Well, I started out playing football and baseball and basketball. I was pretty good at football and basketball. I think it was through my basketball experience in junior high school that you have the boosters, which are parent groups, and I experienced where a player or players were playing more than me who weren't as good as me, but the family were influential donors, boosters, and I didn't like that. So I wanted to take more control of my talent and have be about my talent and not about, a subjective viewpoint that was influenced from outside influences. So uh, I came about track out of rebellion, I guess, if you will, or something that I could totally take control of. I remember my parents, especially my dad, when I was going to track, and he didn't really know what that was about. I mean, he knew what track was, but back then it was really the major sports, football, basketball, and baseball, that, if you were going to pursue something. And that made me even more determined because no one knew a lot about what could become of me in track and what that could lead to. And so it empowered me to have that "I'll show you" attitude. And if I win or lose, I blame me. I don't have to point fingers about somebody not doing their job. And so it was pretty interesting because when I started pursuing track and started having, early success, then my family had to, abruptly learn about track and field. And the irony of the whole thing is, I went to University of Maryland on a track and field scholarship. Never played one down of football there, primarily because they were a running school. They didn't really throw the ball much. I graduated high school 5'10", 150, 55 pounds, soaking wet. And I said, well, I'm not big enough to play. And since they don't throw the ball a whole lot, I don't need to worry about it. And then it was like a 180 on my father, or a 360, depending, complete turnaround, where, when I ended up with the San Francisco 49ers, he was so upset that I was, walking away from track and field because they had become such fans and students. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, Dad, you've always wanted me to play football. I'm just doing it now. And yeah, and I just shook my head like, what do you mean? You really were grooming me early in my adolescence to play football. You coached our teams, Pot Warner teams, all these travel teams I was on. I thought that would have made you happy. And so it was an inverse reaction. But yeah, the whole thing started out of rebellion. I also, part of that rebellion, I started in high school dating a girl from another town over 1 year older than me, and she smoked. And that was a no-no. My father didn't like that. He thought she was fast, and she wasn't fast. She just, for some reason, smoked. And yeah, he wouldn't let me use the car to go see her. She was like 2 miles away. So I would run to her house every day. And he couldn't stop me from doing that because I was just running. And, when I look back now, I was like, boy, you did have a rebellious spirit in you, because you're like, oh, I'm not breaking any rules. He just said, I'm not going to let you use the car to go see her. So I would run 2 miles or so to her home. And then after my visit, she would drive me home. So he didn't want me to go see her, and he definitely didn't want her driving me back home, meaning that we were together. So it was a pretty interesting high school time for me.
And so rebellion led to this great career for you. And for you, it was the hurdles, right? 110-meter hurdles. Why hurdles? What attracted you to that discipline of track?
That seed was planted, ironically, in ninth grade when I went out for the team. And when it came to coach asking people what events they wanted to run, no one raised their hand for the hurdles. And we had a split rail fence around our property. So I used to always run, and at that time called it jumping over it, and enjoyed running away from people, using the fence as an obstacle, but yet navigating it. So no one stood up or raised their hand. So I looked around, And I raised my hand because I said, well, I'll try it. I'm not afraid to try it. I've done it at home, at least something like that. And it made me feel special because I stood out by myself, right? And I was in a league of my own. And I think that I won't call it a reckless attitude, but the can-do attitude, I guess, was birthed in me at an early time that, I'm going to do this just because no one else can do it or wants to do it or says I can't do it wasn't going to deny me. So that spirit that, that had me running over to my girlfriend's house still had me running over hurdles earlier than probably most people thought.
And this is in the late 70s, and you excelled so much that you were using the college hurdles, right? What's the difference between what you should have been running over and what you were running over?
So the high school hurdles are 39 inches. The collegiate hurdles are 42. Collegiate and international hurdles are 42 inches. And my crazy coach even had me going over 45-inch hurdles. He never wanted the height to be an obstacle. He actually, and also felt that the more time I spent over the higher one, I would become more flexible, more attuned to, getting over the hurdles. And then when it came time to transition into college, the next step, that it wouldn't be an obstacle, literally, no pun intended, an obstacle for me. And so initially, I was very good, and we'd have dual meets against other teams. He'd have me running. My lane would be 42 inches, and everyone else's would be 39, which I vehemently disapproved of because the thought of losing, and because of the handicap that they had, it I won't say it enraged me, but it incited me to say, okay, so you don't think I can do this? All right, I'm gonna do this. And so I ran with a little chip on my shoulder. The thought of losing was the motivation. Whether I did or didn't, I was going to do everything I could to make not happen. And fortunately, I was winning the races, hurdling three heights higher. But that was a bittersweet pill because even though I was victorious, um, I felt badly for my competitors because everyone knew that I was hurdling at a higher height, and it's one thing to be better than on someone already, but now you're even kind of in your face. We'll show you how much better we are. So, uh, and I always, from an athletic standpoint, inherently had humility. So that wasn't something that I didn't want to stand out. That was something that the coach was doing, and I was disciplined and obedient when it came to athletics. So I did it begrudging because it was higher, and begrudging because I didn't know how it made my competitors feel, and that didn't make me comfortable.
It certainly helped you though. When you look back at it now, do you see your coach as kind of, using that as extra motivation, using that as a way to make you the best that you could be?
I have found over the course of my athletic career that coaches will use any ploy necessary to motivate the athlete, uh, hoping that the athlete will receive it in a positive way and take hold of it. And so mine, I think, it was a challenge to see if I would step up to it and embrace it. And so I think at some point the light turned on that I felt, well, if he's crazy enough to do this, I'm crazy enough to try it. And so between the two of us, we made it work. And, I never looked back. It was something that you don't know it in the moment, right? You really don't. As you start running races and you start seeing the benefits of it, you're like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And so, because you judge by results. So
The results were really good. Again, in 1977, you decided to go to Maryland. What was it about Maryland? How did that recruiting process go? You hear about recruiting process for basketball, baseball, football. What was it like in track in the late 1970s?
well, I was a much heralded hurdler athlete, and so I had my pick of pretty much any school I wanted to go to. And so I went on several recruiting trips: UCLA, USC, Alabama, Tennessee, of course, Maryland, um, Rutgers, the home state school, um, Villanova. The school I always wanted to go to is the first school that I had visited that had their own track stadium was the University of Tennessee. I had never seen such beautiful amenities, impeccable amenities, and their own track facility all by themselves. I liked the color orange at the time, orange and white. And I knew in my heart that I wanted to go to Tennessee. Unfortunately, Stan Huntsman, the coach, didn't offer me a scholarship. Now, he told everybody that Nehemiah would have never come to Tennessee anyway, so why were we going to extend a scholarship when we knew he wasn't going to come? That was the furthest from the truth. Um, and I had this chip on my shoulder the whole time I was at Maryland. Whenever we ran against Tennessee, I I had a little extra incentive to embarrass them, to humiliate them, do whatever I could. Pen relays, just dominate Tennessee as much as I could. And I would tell that story to whoever wanted to listen to it, and they would come to him and say, "He didn't offer you a scholarship." I said, "Nope." And I remember one day being in the same place as he was, and the topic came up from Jason Grimes, who came out the same year I did. And Jason, he offered Jason my scholarship. Jason was a very well accomplished long jumper, All American. So he was a 5-star athlete. And Jason was just a rebel riser. So he said right to the coach, "Coach, I cannot believe you didn't offer Nehemiah a full scholarship." And the coach looked at me, and I was just waiting to see what he was going to say. And he just said, "That's not true." And I just looked at him. And I said, "It is true. You never offered me a scholarship. The other part about whether I was coming or not is irrelevant. You never offered me the scholarship." And then everybody who was in the room just rode him. And I said, "I'm not lying. I would have gone to Tennessee." But, but when I ended up in Maryland, um, ultimately, when I knew that I wasn't getting the scholarship offer from Tennessee, I have probably had my best time overall recruiting the campus. It was away from home, but not too far, 3.5 hours away. So I knew that I could get home, if I need be. They were the most dominant ACC team, both indoor and outdoors, for 24 straight years prior to me coming. So I was walking into a well-established program. And they had hurdlers there, which was good. So I would, at the time, have to compete to be the best hurdler, but I still, they had All American hurdler and Greg Robinson. So I did feel that there was competition there. There was competition in training that was going to continue to push me and elevate me. And so all in all, it turned out to be a win-win for me.
Yeah, Tennessee's loss was Maryland's gain and your gain as well. You're setting world records. You're the MVP of the Penn relays. At what point did Olympics start to go in your head and feel like, okay, this is making the Olympic team now? It becomes a major goal of mine.
I think at the conclusion of my freshman year, when I was ranked number one in the world, I had lost the NCAA to Greg Foster by 1/100th of a second, primarily because the race before that was a 4x1, and I anchored it, and then had to run all the way back to the starting line, get my blocks, and within 3-4 minutes, the race was gone. So I didn't think I was fully recovered. But I went on to avenge that loss at the Outdoor National Senior Championships, and then went on to have an undefeated European tour and was ranked number one in the world. And that's when I started to believe that I was, if not the best, one of the best hurdlers in the world. And then the discussion of, the Olympics on the 1980 horizon started to become not just something that you thought about, but something that potentially could become a reality, barring an injury, and as long as I stayed consistent. So I'd say going into my sophomore year, that was for me personally a season that I wanted to dominate if possible, but surely show everyone that I was the best hurdler in the world. And 79 statistically was one of my best years, breaking multiple world records and winning NCAAs indoor and outdoor. So, yeah.
You make the team, obviously, 1980, the boycott from the U.S. We had Rowdy Gaines on. He was, slated to win several swimming gold medals. He had to wait 4 years. This was your chance at 21 years old. What do you remember about hearing about that boycott and then feeling about, losing that opportunity to be that champion in the 110 hurdles?
I think when you first hear about the boycott coming out of President Carter's mouth, you're initially probably shocked and dismayed. but hopeful, because we weren't canceling the season. The Olympic Games weren't going to be canceled. So as long as they were going on, you thought maybe there's an outside chance. And for me, I just decided I was going to control what I could control. So we were moving ahead with the Olympic trials. And I said, first things first, I have to be in the top three to make the U.S. team, regardless of what happens. So I want to make sure that, I'm a representative of the United States at the Olympic trials. And then it's not in my hands at that point. So can control what you control. So I was a favorite. I ended up winning the Olympic trials. So it was my first berth as an Olympian. That was exciting in and of itself. Um, and then the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, is the phrase I coined with that, because shortly thereafter we had the Winter Olympics and we had the Miracle on Ice. And, I just thought the United States would rally and we'd go, okay, we're going to show you that we're the dominant country. And especially when you let the Winter Olympians go, I just thought it was uniform. It was the Olympic movement, period. And, winter and summer. So when they let the Winter Olympians go, it gave me at least a false sense of hope. And then ultimately, when he upheld the boycott, that was devastating, right? Because I was the best hurdler in the world. Uh, I was the odds-on favorite to win the gold medal for the United States, and so I didn't get to walk into an Olympic stadium as an Olympian, and that stung. I didn't speak about that experience for over 20 years. It was that painful to me because it's the utopia of any Olympic sport athlete's career. And I knew during that time there were guys who were like 28 years old, 26 years old at that time, was categorized as being old at the end of your career, and they were never going to get another chance. And so I felt, as much as I felt robbed, I was what, 20, 21. I still felt, I had other Olympics ahead of me. So, uh, but I wanted to take advantage of that one because, your first one is the one that means the most significant. When you do it the second time, it's still challenging and probably nerve wracking, but you've been there before. So the newness of it isn't the same as it is when you have your first Olympic trials opportunity and you make your team, and that feeling of making that team can never be replicated. Yes, you can be excited about making another team, but you've done it before. So because I hadn't done it, it was an experience that I knew I would never ever get to have again.
Did you think that 84 was going to be a possibility for you?
So I set my sights on the next 4 years, 1984. Um, Went to 1981, the following year after the Olympic trials, and I made that year like pretty much as many races as possible to be my Olympic Games final. And because I had, Thomas Mulkelt of East Germany, who I had beaten before, won the Olympic Games, gold medal, and the time he ran, I would have easily surpassed it. So I wanted every European to know that this American was truly the dominant hurdler. He would have won the gold medal. And I went on to break the 13-second barrier in 1981, making history. But then the very next year, 1982, the Eastern Bloc countries were talking boycott of the games that were in Los Angeles. And that just, whatever light I had on still, it was out because I didn't get into this to have my freedom of joy stolen from me. And even though the games were going to take place in LA and you can't boycott your own games, I just knew that the cloud that was hanging over the Olympic Games was going to be there. And it took a lot of the joy out of my practice, my training. Like, why am I doing this? I can't freely get to where I want to go because of politics. I became anti-politics because I thought, they're not doing the right thing. They're using it as leverage. Short of going to war, we just, boycott. And so at that point, I remember being at I got invited to the Superstars competition right on the heels of the catch with Dwight Clark when the 49ers winning their first Super Bowl, and sitting at the restaurant bar with he and Chris Collinsworth. That's when the thought of playing professional football was ever brought into discussion.
Yeah, as you said, your dad didn't want you to play football. Then you play football. You have this opportunity. I know we talked before. Tell me about that phone call that gave you a chance to have that tryout with the 49ers.
Yeah, so Dwight Clark and Chris Collinsworth were fans of mine as a track person, track athlete. Marveled about my talent. They marveled how easily I was beating everybody at the superstars, and Dwight in particular just talked ad nauseum about what the Niners could do with a guy like me. And of course, I hadn't played in college, so I knew I'd be a free agent, uh, not not getting drafted. So that meant I probably wouldn't get paid any real money. And at that time, the trust funds were being introduced to track and field. So I was making more than those guys. Even though I had to use a trust fund to justify expenses and all that, I still was making more money than them. But anyway, it's one of America's pastimes, playing professional football. So um, on the heels of that conversation, the very next afternoon, my hotel phone rings. I pick it up, and the gentleman on the other end introduces himself as Bill Walsh. Not knowing Chris or Dwight well, I'm thinking they're having fun at the track guy's expense. And so I'm basically say, yeah, right. And I hang up. A few hours later, the phone rings again, and the same man on the phone says, no, Ronaldo, this is Bill Walsh. And I said, well, if you're Bill Walsh, call my agent. And I hung up on him a second time. And then later that evening, my agent called me and he said, Ronaldo, did you hang up on Bill Walsh? And I said, that was Bill Walsh. He goes, yeah. And I go, oh, wow. So Bill and I, my agent talked to them and they wanted to bring me out to San Francisco and work me out and all that. And when I got to meet Bill Walsh in person, we had that kind of little tongue in cheek thing, like, yeah, this is the guy that hung up on me. No NFL prospect probably in history would ever hang up on a head coach, but that shows you the naivete and the humility of me not taking myself that seriously, thinking I was all that. But and then ultimately other teams found out about it, so I had other tryouts. But the Niners, I guess, the team that first showed interest, Bill Walsh being a fan of mine, realizing that if I signed that contract, according to the amateur rules at that time, I would lose my eligibility. So he fully guaranteed my entire contract, which was very noble of him. Um, and at that particular time, I had signed the largest free agent contract in the history of the NFL back in 1982. So again, it was groundbreaking. It was the best opportunity going to the best team I could have gone to, the team of the 80s, the dynasty, playing with some of the all-time Hall of Fame greats. Great experience. It was, if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do that. Although if I knew that they were going to turn pro, open up the sport to professionalism the next year, I probably would have paused that entree into football, because people like Carl Lewis were making way more money than I was, not enduring the physicality of running track as I was playing football.
Yeah, what was the biggest adjustment going from track to football? And for you, and also I know, Joe Montana, Hall of Fame quarterback, you guys had to work in your timing a little bit.
Yeah, so football is a lot of start and stops, and for track, like, you warm up over a certain period of time, and then you time it according to how many minutes or so before your race, and you're still fairly warm to be able to go out and exert 100%. In football, you warm up and you stand around a lot. And so and then you're called in a moment's notice, and you're supposed to go from 0 to 60 right away. And so that was very challenging for me, is to keeping myself warm so that I could be my best self physically. Uh, Track and field athletes, especially sprinters and hurdlers, we run off a feel. And so feel of fluidity. And so when I wasn't always able to do that, they didn't know it, but I wasn't as confident in my outright physical gifts that I normally would be. But it was it was a great time there. I suffered my first hamstring injury in training camp my first year. Being fatigued at the end of the day and standing around, and then having to go all out and dive for a ball. And I pulled a hamstring. Had never done that in track and field. Never did that over a hurdle. And so that took quite a while to heal. Um, and then the I guess the surrealness of it was when Bill Walsh told me that I had to understand the difference between pain and injury. And I said, the two are the same. And you feel a little stiffness, a little tightness. Uh, you yield in precaution before you feel pain, right? So you feel a discomfort or whatever, you wave the white flag. It's like, okay, we're not going to push this. In football, that machismo attitude, you endure it, survival of the fittest. But so that was the hardest adjustment for me. The physicality, that's comes with the territory, but it was learning how, after Sunday's game, being bruised up and beat up, typically I would be resting and you get treatment, but you still are out there the next day, and repeating it, rinse and, you know, rinse and repeat. So, I didn't like that. That was different. That was a different culture, a different mindset. We listen to our bodies. We're very in tune with our bodies. So I felt not all the time, but throughout my 4 years with the Niners, I abused my body. I didn't treat it like it was sacred. And you can't do that in football. It's next man up. So if you want to play, you got to suck it up and just do what you can do. So, and I saw a lot of guys doing, a lot of damage to their bodies, but it was a mindset that they grew up in, and I didn't. Um, so, I learned how to push myself beyond what I wanted to, and it becomes a mindset, I guess. So I accepted it, although I didn't like it.
How about the euphoria of scoring a touchdown as it compares to breaking a world record? As you said, 13 seconds, the first one under 13 seconds at Switzerland in 81 in the 110-meter hurdles. Which one did you get, more enjoyment out of during your career?
Well, there's nothing that can compare to being the first to ever do something. I had broken world records, so I guess every time I broke a world record, I was the first to do it, right? Because it was a world record. But the magical 13-second barrier, doing something that they thought no man could do, and I did it. Years later, it opens the door for other people to believe that they could do it. But it's they're both right up there. From a team, when you get to catch a pass, a touchdown pass, a long touchdown pass from the one of the goats, Joe Montana, and it's on national TV for the whole world to see. That's something special too. Not many people get to do that, and yeah, and Joe was an incredible quarterback. We called him Joe Cool for a reason. So he had a great calmness about him, and an innate confidence that I saw right away. And so it made it very easy to, want to do right by him by running the right route, catching the pass, but he threw a nice football. Um, so yeah, that ranks right up there to be able to tell someone I caught multiple touchdown passes from Joe Montana, and I got to win a Super Bowl that so many great athletes, great football players never did.
Yeah, this time of year with the Super Bowl 60 coming up, this was Super Bowl 19 for you. You guys beat Miami. I mean, as you said, other people maybe that was a lifelong dream. Not so much for you, but what was it like to be a part of that and to be a Super Bowl champion?
It was to be on that 84 Super Bowl team was quite the experience. Number one, we should have gone undefeated. Our only loss came to the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. But we're such a dominant team on both sides of the ball. A little bit too dominant when it came to confidence, because when the game was basically a home game, we played at Stanford University, so it was basically local fans. Um, we knew we were going to win. I could feel that uh, overflowing of confidence in our locker room, pregame, halftime, et cetera. We went on to win with 38-16, I think it was. So it wasn't that close. It was a big showdown between Montana and who's the quarterback from Miami
Dan
Dolphins?
Marino at the
Dan
time, right?
Marino. Yeah,
Yeah.
Marino and Montana, the two M's. But we didn't have a post-game celebration. And my family came from the East Coast, and everybody was, wanting to see this big conversation. And we didn't have the beer and the champagne in the locker room. It was just one of these poised, exuberant, speeches by Bill Walsh and said, go home and enjoy yourselves with your families, and we will celebrate, a little later on. And I remember coming out of the locker room and, meeting up with my family, and they're like, "So where's the celebration?" I go, "There isn't any. I'm going home." So here it is. I built up the Super Bowl victory as something that I saw on TV, in the locker rooms and the beer and all of that. And in our locker room, it was melancholy. It was like we just took care of business. We knew it, no big deal. I think they just didn't want the fans to bombard where we were going because people would find out where it was. So they wanted it to die down and so that it could be just our team and our families. And when we did have that celebration about 2-3 months later, it was magnificent downtown San Francisco. It was black tie and it was over the top. I just wish it had happened, if not that night, the next day. But ultimately it was worth its weight. I just wasn't prepared for the delayed celebration.
You got the jersey on the wall. You have the Super Bowl ring there as well, or is that
I
somewhere?
have it behind me in a case behind me, yeah. And I don't wear it as much now unless someone asks for it. Can you bring your ring? No, because a lot of people haven't seen a Super Bowl ring because it's big and it's heavy. Uh, I've seen some rings since that; they're even bigger and more gaudy. But it's a trophy. I treat it as a trophy. It's in a beautiful case, and so if someone comes to visit me, I may show them that just because they've never seen one. But I don't wear it as much. I'm very proud of it. Obviously, it's a part of my athletic legacy, and so and it I became before I was really only known in track and field circles in the United States, and I was an international superstar because track and field is big in Europe. So I was everyone knew me all around the world. I wasn't that well known here outside of track and field fans. And then the irony of playing with the San Francisco 49ers. So so in Europe I was that great hurdler who went to play American football. And then in America I was that great, American football player who runs track. So all of a sudden, my identity became, got relabeled because I became more, I won't say famous, but well known because I was playing America's game, football. And I started, more people started knowing of me. They may have heard of me, but because I was playing with the San Francisco 49ers, I became more widely known in my own country. So football allowed me to I guess to get street creed, for track here when I wasn't getting it as much before.
You told me before you watch a game, and a guy hurdles somebody. They say, "Oh, there's a Nehemiah." Did you ever hurdle somebody on the football field?
Never even thought about it. I don't suggest anyone do that. It's very dangerous depending what happens. And but now, I mean, it's commonplace. Whether it's in college or especially in the pros, and people still talk about it, right? And they still say that he just did a Nehemiah, which is really interesting because I didn't win a gold medal. And Roger Kingdon won 2 gold medals, and Alan Johnson won a gold medal. There've been all these great hurdlers that won gold medals, but they only reference me, and so that's very flattering, and still very humbling because, I didn't know that I guess what I my takeaway is that I left that type of indelible impression on people that when they see that, the imagery of me, comes to the forefront of their minds, and, so I'm flattered by it. It's better to be known than unknown because each year that passes, your name is said less and less. So when you're remembered, it's very gratifying and very humbling.
I know among your trophies, maybe back there as well, the 4 that you won with the superstars. Superstars, tell our people who maybe don't remember what the superstars were because you excelled in that and are a 4-time champion.
Yeah, I also have to credit the Superstars competition and invitation to letting America know what kind of talented athlete I was. And Superstars was a gathering of America's, in some cases, international athletes as well. The finest athletes from a variety of sports in America, all the major sports, and some of the boxing as well, some swimmers, um, and you're there for like 3 days, and you compete in 7 out of 10 events. if you're a track and field guy, in my case, a hurdler, so they call it, I was close to sprinting, so I couldn't do the 100. I could run the 800 meters, but I couldn't do that. And they have the bike, they have the 800, they have the obstacle course, they have swimming, golf, basketball, bowling, tennis, weightlifting. So you pick 7 out of the 10. And over 3 days, the athlete who accumulates the most points is crowned the superstar. And it's, it's first through 8, I guess, and it's money prizes. And so from the time I was invited, my first 3 consecutive years, I dominated and won it. My second year, I had won it in the first day. So it's a 3-day event. So, but I used to tell everybody that, when you train for 2 hours, it gives you a lot of other time to develop other hobbies. So whether it was playing tennis or learning the flip turn in swimming or clean and jerk, I had time to learn all these things. And actually, I always tell everybody I was cross training before cross training was even known. I'd be doing all these things. And so I had great agility and I had great skill sets. And so I won it my first 3 years. And I think after my third year, I don't know if they were getting grumblings from me embarrassing America's greatest athletes and football players and baseball players and all that, but they kicked me out for 2 years and they didn't invite me back. And it's supposed to be, you go until you can't win. So I was on hiatus for 2 years. I had totally forgotten about it. I just said, okay, I was there for 3 years. I was the all-time winningest superstar with the money. And then the third year of my exile, they invited me back. And I won again. So it was 4 times, 4 appearances. And then I got invited again. But at that point, it didn't have the same luster to me. And I finished, what did I finish? Second or fourth. I think I may have finished fourth. But it didn't mean as much because I'd been there, done that. But it was a great experience. Met a lot of great athletes, my peers who the greatest thing about the superstars is that you find out that athletes, they say game recognizes game. So whatever the game is, if you're one of the tops, you got fans from other sports. And so I didn't know that I had that many fans from the other sports. And, talking to Reggie Jackson and Mike Schmidt, all these different things, Aaron Pryor, boxers, who was it? Barry Bonds, all these guys, Dwight Clark, all these guys that I got to meet, Mark Gastineau, they would talk to me like I was one of their boys. And because they were thrilled to meet me equally as I was thrilled to meet them. So that was very gratifying. If anything, my takeaway was that there is a fraternity of athletes who watch other sports other than their own, who are fans of other athletes.
And you won in 81, 82, 83, and on your return in 86. So a 4-time champion there and with the superstars. After that, I know you did some sports agency. Currently, you're the executive director of the M Club back in Maryland as well, which, now with college athletics, a little bit maybe similar to what you were doing with the sports agency. What's a little bit of your role right now with the M Club and what you enjoy about, your career maybe coming full circle in a sense?
Yes. So I've always been a supporter of Maryland athletics, a donor, contributor. So I always tell everybody I've always been on the periphery. I've served on boards, served on search committees. So they've kept me around and close. So I've always felt, a part of the Terp family. And then when the opportunity that was presented to me about interviewing for the M Club executive director, that's the former athlete engagement arm of the university. Maryland and maybe some other schools as well experienced this. They hadn't done a great job of I guess, keeping former athletes, former greats engaged with the program. And so a lot of athletes had a disenchantment feeling about Maryland, felt devalued. I know, especially non-revenue athletes, right? Because it's always football and basketball on the major campuses. So as a non-revenue athlete who played professional football, I can walk the walk and talk the talk. So what I'm trying to do is re-engage them. One, having them become a member of the M Club. It's nominal. It's not a lot of money, $75. Or if you give us a $550 contribution, that's a lifetime. So we don't bug you anymore. And you get a host of benefits. The more members we have, the more benefits we can provide, whether that's sweet tickets, Hall of Fame celebrations, anniversaries, meet and greets, you know, tailgates, you name it, we do it. And so I'm trying to re-engage athletes. It's I have been overwhelmingly positively received, which is exciting and unnerving at the same time because it's like, you had many executive directors. I haven't had so many people so excited about me being the executive director. I think a lot of it is because most people heard of me, but a lot of people never met me. So I'm meeting a lot of people. I don't go to every single game. There's wrestling and volleyball and all these different sports. But I make my rounds. I'm spending time talking to people. I don't hide behind emails or text messages, so they get to see me. I am an M Club lifetime member myself, so I have supported it financially. So I'm not saying something I'm not doing, and I'm looking forward to engaging more athletes. I've talked to a lot of athletes who were soured on our school, and I just get them to focus on the time they were here as student athletes. Was that a solid, positive experience? And they say, yes, I loved it at Maryland. I said, okay, let's coin that and go forward and use that as a platform, a foundation to build on. And I won't say I'm going to do something and not do it. And if you have any concerns, I'm here. I'm not going to, just tell you to talk to the hand. And so I'm getting overwhelmingly positive responses when people, talk to me because they can touch me. They have access to me. They call me in my office. Not everyone complains, and I get a lot of compliments. So we're just trying to grow this thing organically. Our numbers prior to me coming in are extremely low. So I think the bar is low for me to build upon, but I'm excited about it. I'm running a couple of nice programs to build it. A lot of people are receiving it well, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I always tell everybody, just because you leave campus doesn't mean you're not still a part of the team. So get off the sidelines and let's stay engaged, stay involved. Once a Terp, always a Terp isn't just a phrase, you know. So trying to hit the right, marks and touch the right emotions with people and get people fired up. And we'll see what happens. I mean, got a lot of work to do, but it's been positive so far.
And
And I'm
again,
at my
you're
alma mater.
yeah, and your alma mater, and you're the Athletics Hall of Fame member as well. Does that
Yeah.
kind of carry some weight when you're talking to whether it's recent graduates or even a couple of years, 10 years, 20 years graduates that maybe didn't know about you, but now you're in this position and you're a Hall of Famer as well.
Yeah, we have an upcoming women's field hockey banquet coming up February 6th, and they asked me to speak, at the banquet, which I was surprised, and I said sure. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some of my experience and some of my insights into the young ladies. And we've had track and field alumni gatherings already. We have a big men's basketball a reunion coming up the third week of February. So I'm heavily involved in all these types of things. We've already sat down and had our Hall of Fame committee selections. So that's coming up in homecoming in September, October. So it's never a dull moment. You figure a university that has 20, 22 sports, there's something going on all the time. And so we're very busy. So it's never a boring day in the office. And I like that. But it's always engagement, whether it's with potential donors, but usually always, I do speak to some donors, not to solicit donations from them, but just as a part of my job. Mainly mine is to endear our former athletes of all sports. And so I'm enjoying that and hearing what they have to say. And like I said, getting them involved. One of my greatest things I tell people, because everybody wants tickets. And I go, well, if we gave every athlete a ticket, no one will be at the game. So, but I say the more members we have more funds to create, benefits that everyone would appreciate. So, we're doing pretty well. And hopefully one of my rollouts right now is that the team that signs up the most new or lifetime members, the M Club will give a financial donation to the team. So everybody's fired up about that. And I go, so I'd use an example. I said, well, we get 200 lifetime members. That's $110,000. So, you could get probably at least 20 grand from us. And they go, what? I go, yes. So that should motivate you. So I'm trying to think out of the box, get something that people, can relate to and figure that they can benefit from, not just we're taking money from you. No, we're trying to give it back to you as well.
Yeah, it takes a lot of funds, big budget for Division One programs these days. You mentioned
Right.
earlier how you're recognized in the U.S. compared to internationally. For you, are you a track guy who played football? Or are you a football guy who played track? Where is if you would describe who you are to somebody off the street, what would you say?
Well, I said our AD will always tell everybody, he didn't just run track here. He's got a Super Bowl ring. So I'm a track guy. I cut my teeth on track, right? It made me who I was. If it weren't for track, the NFL wouldn't have come calling. So everything is derived from my track and field attributes. And I just happen to have the opportunity to play professional football with arguably one of the best teams ever. And I'm a trivia question on Jeopardy, so I like that.
Not many people are. That's amazing. Have you actually watched the show when you were on there, or somebody told you about it?
Someone, I guess, recorded it the night that it happened, and it said last name a record-setting hurdler and San Francisco 49er, Ronaldo, and the person said, "Who is Nehemiah?" Yeah. So I have that. Uh, it's pretty cool to say I was a trivia question on Jeopardy. So, and I have we have an all staff meeting faculty of the university, and so they were telling me that I'm going to be called on. It's my first one to introduce myself and say a fun fact about me. And I was thinking about I was going to tell them, well, fun fact is, my nickname is Skeets. And then I said, no, my fun fact is I'm a Jeopardy trivia question. And so I think that's more probably a fun fact than just my nickname.
Yeah, no, I asked you before about your nickname. How did that come about?
So you know what a skeet is at a rifle range when they say pull and it goes really fast across. So I crawled really fast across the floor. And they said, look, he's skeeting about. Look at him. Look at him. He's like a skeet. And the baby name is Skeetsy. So my family, they call me Skeetsy. But once I went to the 49ers in 1982, I finally felt that I was outgrowing Skeets. And so that's when I went, exclusively Ronaldo. And so, 1982 is when Ronaldo was reborn. And so now when I hear Skeets, I kind of cringe. But if someone's, around my demographics, then I say, okay, you're old enough to know that name. But if a young person says it, I say it seriously, but I say it jokingly, and I'll say, you're not old enough to say that name, because sometimes they weren't even born. So I'm like, how do you even know that name? So I don't know. My name is Ronaldo. It's only for people who have gray hair or no hair.
Are you on social media? How can people follow you to follow you, learn more about you?
So let's see. I do have a LinkedIn. I do have Instagram, and I do not that I'm on them all the time because they can be time consuming. And then they can find me through the M Club Network. So that's a website as well, which is Maryland. So there's 3 different forms, technically 4 if you use TikTok, but nowadays I try. And the only reason I was on those, to be honest with you, is when I was still in the agent business, it was the only way I could find out what things my clients were doing or saying. And so I had, alerts all the time if someone did something that would. But now that I'm not in that business, I'm on social media only for informational purposes. But, once you get on there, sometimes you get distracted and something pops up in your feed. And next thing you know, so I really try to be more disciplined and stay away from it as much as I can. And I only use like the Maryland Network at work, things of that nature.
Well, Renaldo, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today and sharing your story. What an incredible story you have. And again, not just track, but football as well, and so many great things. Best of luck to you with Maryland and as you continue to make a difference there at your alma mater.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and go Terps.
Another great guest, more great stories from Renaldo Nehemiah. We thank him for his time here today, from the track to football, the Super Bowl, world records, everything in between as well. Great story there. As always, we thank you for watching and listening and invite you to like, to subscribe, and to share our shows. We continue to bring you great guests, great stories in the world of sports. For JR Equipment, our creator, producer, and director behind the scenes, I'm Mike Vaccaro. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Another episode of In the Front Row. Have a great day, everybody.